right, hello everyone, and welcome to day number 4 of our Wills Week seminars. I hope you've been having as much fun learning all about the intricacies of estate planning that I have. And we today have a very interesting speaker, something a little bit out of the norm. And if you were with us on Monday, Sherry Fleming alluded to Malika. So we're going to talk about sticky conversations. But before we get into it, if you want to go into the chat and just put in your name, the campus you are affiliated with, and maybe we've been asking whether or not you have estate plans in place, but maybe everybody's tired of answering that. So maybe you could say, what's one thing that has surprised you that you've learned already? Just, maybe something you hadn't considered was part of estate planning to begin with. So we are going to go ahead and get started in just a couple of minutes. I do want to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. I almost said housebreaking. I have too many dogs. But if you would please keep your questions to the Q&A, just because it's very hard to monitor the chat, and we as people behind the scenes can't copy your question over. So it would be easier for Malika, and Malika would like to take your questions at the end. So please do type them in along the way. We appreciate that. My name is Ann Kolakowski. I am Director of Gift Planning Services for the University System of Maryland, and I'm happy to have some colleagues from other campuses helping out behind the scenes. We have Nicole from the University of Maryland College Park, and Liz Connors and Missy Ham-Cross from University of Maryland Baltimore, and my colleague Michaela from the University System Office. So again, we're going to be recording today's session. We will be sending out links tomorrow after the final session. We have a chance to process everything. We'll be sending that to everyone who registered, so you can go back and rewatch these or share them with family. And if the presenter is okay with sharing the actual presentation, we will include PDFs of the slides as well, but that will be at the presenter's discretion. There'll also be a survey in there, and we really encourage you to fill it out. It's very brief, but your feedback really helps us as we think about putting this program and others together for next year. So with that behind us, I want to go ahead and introduce Malika. Malika Moore, who has 3 social work related degrees that I'm not going to try and read because I get them all messed up. But the interesting addendum is she is an aging life care professional and also a licensed clinical social worker in DC and Maryland. She founded Aging and Amazing, a company that strives to support older adults, caregivers, and the networks that surround them. Her niche and life mission is ensuring care and interaction with older adults is more than a checkbox. Malika has over a decade of experience as a professional clinician, public speaker, and business owner, and I think we're going to hear soon she has a genuine passion for older adults and caregivers. She's served in several different capacities in her professional career, including consultant, clinician, geriatric care manager, medical social worker, psychotherapist, support group facilitator, and adjunct professor. Whew. You are amazing. She was recognized and awarded the 2022 Aging Life Care Association Rising Star Award. Malika received her bachelor's in arts in psychology from Samford University and her master of social work from the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. So with that in mind, I introduce Malika and take it away.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. All right. So, sticky conversations. I struggled with what image to place at the forefront of this presentation, but I thought honey was really fitting because if you think about it, if anybody's ever touched honey or a jar that hasn't been cleaned properly, very sticky. You're rubbing your fingers together and you're trying to fix the situation. Even though it's very sticky, it can be very sweet. And so that's what we're going to talk about, this sticky but potential sweet spots in this part of estate planning that's more so on the emotional side. It's not black and white. So let's just jump right into it. We'll start with myths, warnings, choice consideration, ethical will, start the conversation, resources, and staying in touch. As we go through the presentation, I want you to keep in mind that although my niche and love is for older adults and family caregivers, that term family caregiver is broad. So you could be, as you've learned this electrifying week with speakers such as Sherry Fleming, it's just been a great week that, you could be caring for someone with special needs. That's broad. So I want you to keep in mind as you're listening to things, don't narrow it down just to older adults. I want you to realize that we're all aging and amazing. And so these may be applicable as you move forward. Okay, let's start with the myths. I know I'm going to read a few of these, maybe all of them, but you can type in the chat a few myths that you've had about having conversations about end of life or any kind of planning, estate planning topic. So you've learned the different categories, end of life, selecting a power of attorney, or you've tried to have that conversation with your loved one, maybe, or you're thinking about it, or it's on your list of things to do to get your life in order. What are some myths that are coming to mind? So I have listed a few that I've heard in not only my personal life, but in my professional life. And you can type in the chat a few more, but I'm too young to do this. That's something that to put any plans in place. That's something common that you hear. This one, I guess this might be my family. My family knows what I want, so I don't need to write anything down. Or my family will automatically handle everything. Or if I put these documents in place, that means that people can do whatever they want. Appointing my power of attorney means I lose control over finances or healthcare decisions. This one is special. My family will always agree on my care, so I don't need to appoint or have these type of conversations at all. I can just leave everything to be decided by the courts. I've heard that. Only people with large estates need end of life planning. And then this one is it's kind of scary, but I hear this often. If I start planning for illness, death, or disability, it will make it happen. So it kind of comes with that thought process of, I don't want to jinx myself. So I'm not going to start planning or talking about this because next thing I know, everything we're planning for is going to happen. So I know you've probably typed some great myths that you've heard. And oh, someone said assuming to remember it all. So those are things that can create barriers. Myths can create barriers. All right. And you've probably been, if you've been tuning in all week, we're just going to briefly recap. There are some downsides to having those myths in your forefront or thinking that your myths are facts. For example, you may have unwanted medical procedures. There may be family separation where you would not have had it that way if things were planned. There may be mismanagement of funds or an unwanted decision maker, um, financial exploitation, and many more. So there are a lot of things that come with avoiding the conversation. It doesn't go away, and most of us have heard ignorance is bliss, but it really can be costly and it can be distressing. And the core of everything that we're talking about today is that this is all very emotional. Okay. This is something that I probably have. We all have those few things that in my professional life, I'm probably going to say this a few times a month. So I have this image of this cookie because there's so many times where I've worked with families or even in my own family, as we all have families, where it's just people have this idea that is cookie cutter or you're splitting a cookie in half. And what I mean that by that, you may have someone that says, hey, I have a niece and a nephew. That person's going to do this person's going to do that. I'm going to do this for this person, they're going to do that. So they try to break it even and make everything fair and equal. And these types of conversations, that's not what you want to do. It's not a cookie. The way you want your plans, the way you want your life to go is bigger than a cookie, and the consequences of not planning and not talking about it are much greater. In fact, you've learned and you probably know by now that a family member may not be the best person, or you may have somebody really strong in one area, but they're not strong in this one. Or they may have some challenge that that will prevent them from properly doing what you like executed. So they're a good person, but they're not the person to get done what you need to get done. And something that I run across often as we're all aging is that sometimes you may put your peer that's the same age. So what I find a lot of times is as we're getting older, people start to pass away or they get sick or something happens. And it's like, oh, now I have to rethink this, because when we were younger, we thought this was the plan. This is how it would go. Well, we would break that cookie in half. So I just want you to know and keep in mind that selecting your decision makers is not as simple as splitting a cookie to share. And that can be the most frustrating part, and it can lend itself to financial exploitation and just this whole myriad of problems that no one wants, because they just want to be fair. They want to be people pleasers. You get one piece of the cookie and it's another person, so you get one piece of the cookie, when sometimes you just need to hand that whole cookie over, or you're splitting it in half to say, hey, you're the best with this, you're the best with that. And the other person is just like, hey, I'm going to, you're not involved at all. That's difficult. The drama. So I often meet with people who say, hey, Malika, you don't know my family. I'm telling you, I'm just trying to warn you. There's some things going on, and my family is unlike any other family. And I can't argue that. I don't personally know anybody's family, but I've worked with enough families, and I will say my own family has been my training ground, where I know that every family has something. And what I've noticed is that some families and family is the way you define it. That may not be your blood relatives, but it may be a family that you've kind of compiled over the years, or you may be solo ager and have these group of people that you consider family. There can be disagreements, there can be drama, there can be things that come up from the recital when the dad didn't show up to the recital or something. Those things sometimes come haunt you, and that makes these conversations more complicated, and people want to avoid them because it's like, okay, I can't deal with this. And sometimes there's a place to say, look, you can't. And some it's just like, okay, well, let's get some support to intervene. All right. I want to talk about we've all heard of the different leadership styles. And I kind of translated this to the different caregiving styles. And the way I'm bringing this full circle is that this may also help you be a guide with how you may select someone who is going to support you in your endeavors. So these type of leadership styles may be the way that you decide how are we going to have who's going to have this conversation about end of life, who's going to have this conversation about us booking that appointment with the attorney, who's going to have this conversation about all the things that go under estate planning. So when I say the different type of leadership styles or caregiving styles, it is, so we're going to start with autocratic. This person is like, look, this is the way it is. There's no discussion. I don't want to talk about it. This is how it's going. Then you have the laissez-faire. Oh, whatever you want, whatever they want, just make it happen. And the democratic is, let's take a vote. Let's take a vote. What do you want? What do you want? Let's try to make this better. The bureaucratic caregiver or leadership style is where everything's by the book. So they're the people that maybe show up and say, look, I read this great book and it has step 1, 2, 3 of how you should talk to mom about her end of life plans or who she's going to appoint. All you do is go through each step and it's going to lay out just like that. I've read the articles, I've read the work, the research. This is what you do. Then you have the servant who's just trying to serve and make sure everybody's okay, often putting others' needs before theirs. And then you have that person who's situational. So in a situational leadership or caregiver, and that means that they may not lean to one side heavily or not. They may be sitting right here to say, okay, whatever the situation calls for, that's what I'm going to be. Here are the numbers. And so I may step into my autocratic leadership or caregiving style because the numbers speak for itself. Or they may be laissez-faire. Maybe someone's into life and they have a diagnosis of diabetes, and we're talking about should we give them ice cream and whatever they want. They may be, in that situation, let's just let that person have the ice cream. Let's just go that way. So these are the type of things that I want you to consider, these different styles and how that may translate to how you're determining who's going to do what, or even who's going to have the conversation about the various things that need to be planned. Okay. All right. So we are going to talk about special considerations. These things are not easy. However, sometimes when you're trying to open up that conversation with your loved one or your relative about, hey, we need to have a serious conversation about what you want to do. And you may be listening and think some things are just absolutely ridiculous. Or you may say, oh, that's doable. And then there may be a category where it's like a maybe. Maybe we could do this. Give me more information, let me know, or let's sit down with the proper person if we don't have the knowledge to do so. And so what I want you to consider is when you're trying to have this conversation, where you're thinking of how to have it, there's some special considerations. Limited resources. For example, there may be a certain communities that your loved one really likes and really wants to go to, but financially, it is not aligning. Okay, so it's a wish and a goal to be at this lovely community, but when we're looking at the numbers, that may not happen. So what I want you to take from this is not to be discouraged and give up and close the conversation. But you see that big question mark right there? I am encouraging you to start asking open-ended questions. So if they tell you they want Beverly Hills Assisted Living, I completely made that up, it may be real. Beverly Hills Assisted Living, and it's $20,000 a month, and you're like, it's no way we're getting you into Beverly Hills Assisted Living. You want to ask open-ended questions. What do you like about that? And then what you want to really zero in on is what is possible outside of this place? What's at the core that this person wants? Maybe they like, oh, it's quiet. When I walked in there, it's nice and quiet. Or the food was good. Or it's close to where you live. So don't assume, as the assumption may be, oh, that's a big, pretty, fancy place, and that's why they want it. But you may be able to dig a little deeper to find out, oh, at the core of it, they really want to be close to me. Or at the core of they really value that that place was clean and it smelled good when they walked in. So you may not be able to get Beverly Hills assisted living, but I can find something that's when you're within your budget or within your insurance that can meet some of those things, maybe not all, that meant a lot to you. So helping in the planning process. Then when you're thinking about choosing someone, there's an amount of creativity, and even in the conversation, it may be things that in this sticky conversation they're not thinking of. So you want to have some thoughts that are outside of the box. For example, you don't want your care needs to be neglected. If you want to stay at home and that's not possible, then okay, can we think creative about this? Let's think about your support system. Who's in the support system? Let's talk about when this would even be a conversation. And that's the thing. That's where those myths can come popping up and creeping up, and you have to try to challenge them in a gentle way or get to the core of what's really happening. Like, okay, you're trying to put me in a nursing home or whatever the thought may be. So, a creative problem solver is someone that you want to think of as a strength when it calls for it. Some things we don't need creativity. Like you're going to sit with your attorney and hear they'll be creative, but making sure it's legal and it actually works. And then some areas that are more on the emotional side, we can get a little bit creative because emotions can be messy and they can be unpredictable, those type of things. So the next one, it kind of ties into the creative problem solving is balancing wishes and care. This is a big one. And I can give you more than one example, but one that really stands out to me is I'll hear people say, "Well, I promise my loved one I'll never put them in a nursing home." And then what I will see is, okay, they're at home and you're gone 12 hours and they can't get out of the bed. They don't have care. Is that really what your loved one wanted? So the core wish may be comfort and dignity and safety, whereas or there may be some services that you get like, oh, if you get this service, we can come back and put a lien on your house. But the person's sick and they don't have any other option. So really not just looking at the surface level when you're having these discussions, like, okay, what's at the core of that? You never want to be placed in a nursing home. What's at the core of that? Finding out what's in it for them, what's important to them. The other thing is if you have financial resources, people may not want to spend the money like, oh, she would never spend money on that. I have a situation that happened many, many years ago where this person was very wealthy and they didn't want to spend money and they were a multimillionaire and we were talking about $35 an hour for home care. And so for me, I'm just like, okay, this this may be a good decision because it's going to keep you safe in home. But what I learned is in talking and asking those open-ended questions is that this person grew up during the Great Depression. And although they had this money, there was this underlying fear of not having enough, even though enough was there. So being able to make decisions and not say, oh, they never wanted that, but really being able to say in the conversation, all right, what's at the core of that? Because I really want to know if that option is not available or we have to do something else, what's important and how can we honor that in another way? And this one is huge, respecting religious and non-religious wishes. This is the importance of having this conversation. You may have somebody who identifies with a certain religion, but they're not practicing it. Or you may have someone that really is bent on, hey, I want a funeral, and then they get cremated or there's a memorial or something like that. So these are things that you want to keep in mind when you're having the conversation and even when you're thinking for yourself. And then, all right, let's plan what are your core values so I'll know a little bit more about you. And we'll talk about an ethical will and how that can help. All right, so you're trying to strike a balance. And it's tough because it's a lot of things to strike a balance. You have cultural barriers, myths, respect, proper execution, assumptions, protection, and family dynamics. And so striking a balance can be difficult, but if you could just get one of these areas, you might be winning. One or two of these areas, you might be winning, but the goal is to really figure out where is my role. I may not be able to fix all of these things, but also getting your loved one to think about that. Because even if you're in the same family, there could be different cultural, like people grow up and they do different things. So all these things I want you to keep in mind when you're having the conversation and don't assume the person's you. All right. So freedom, how do you have freedom and control? Those things, an ethical will can help with that. So this is a non-legal document that can be kind of fun. It can be what you make it. And thinking about this age that we're in now with so much social media, some people are doing it and they don't know it. They're creating these ethical wills. It's a non-legal document used to communicate personal messages such as value, advice, and stories. And the benefit is that it's going to complement all those legal wills that you've developed with your attorney, and it's going to help you connect emotionally. And the generations that you may never meet, they'll get to see how you were, how your voice sound, and if that's the route you choose to go, or something you left behind. So you get to leave a legacy, and legacy is more than finances, it's more than degrees, it's who you are. So this what you want to think about when we're discussing ethical wills. Okay, so you can take a picture of this or whatever you like, screenshot it. These are some creative ideas that you can do to create an ethical will. So I have it separated for those who like social media and those who are like, no, I don't really want to do social media. I'm not on it. Or those who there's like a crossover, like I want to do a little bit of both. So real-time creative ideas could be handwritten letters, and it could be a memory or a scrapbook, a recipe book, a, a storytelling quilt, a memory box, poetry, short stories. Though, so anything that's important to you to tell your story. And sometimes this ethical will be your open door, because maybe you haven't got an opportunity to say, hey, we need to go plan with an attorney, or we need to hire somebody else. We need to hire someone else to support us. We have to get this done. I want to make sure you're honored in every way possible, emotionally, financially, spiritually, all of those ways. But sometimes this is a light-hearted way to open up the door. This may be the first thing that you're able to get to, and you may be able to learn what's important to your loved one. That's often a question I'll ask. What's important to them? And we'll get to that in the next slide. But also social media. There are ways where you can make it private. You can create a private Facebook group and invite your family and your friends. You can do private YouTube videos or diaries. You can do them publicly. I've watched videos where people were at end of life, and they're pretty touching. And it also helps people who may be going through the same thing. So you can leave a worldwide legacy, or it could just be exclusive to your family. One that's interesting that I've seen is the Pinterest boards. So being able to post quotes and things that you would have liked, and your family can come look at that. Blog posts, a Google Drive, if you have Gmail or something like that, some kind of online cloud drive where you can start uploading pictures and videos and things that are important to you, and maybe sharing that link, putting it somewhere safe, and maybe you start sharing it now or when you pass away. Snapchat memories, and TikTok storytelling. So you can choose your method. So I initially, when I hear the word ethical, the ethical wills, I think of like old movies where you sit and it's somebody in a chair and they're looking straight and they're like, okay, Sarah, I'm leaving. I'm leaving, and I want you to know that da 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 da. Now you can be very fun. You can dress up, you can dress down, you can be on your couch, you can have your favorite pet in the video. There are so many creative ways. And sometimes before you can even get to the more serious things, this may be your open door leading to that conversation. All right. All right. So starting the conversation, I gave you some tips and tidbits as we've gone through this presentation. So for some things that I've discussed, like open-ended questions are important. Also finding core values. We talked about core values. All of us have core values. So what are some things that are, no matter where we go, are important to us? It may be family, it may be finance, it may be faith. There are a whole list of core values. You can actually Google and see how many core values there are. And you can see, okay, what are mine? What are some things that kind of stand still over my life as being important to me? And the person that you're speaking with is going to have some also, they may not match yours. And that's what we have to be flexible with and understanding. All right. So, what's in it for them? Before you even start this conversation, as I mentioned, what is in it for them? For you, you want to help them plan. Maybe you want the grief process is a little bit, I don't know if it's easier, but you don't have to worry about another thing, all those other things if the plans are in place or you have the right person in place, that type of thing. So what's in it for them? What I mean is if money is important to them, you want to approach it with the financial angle. If independence is important to them, you want to say, well, this is going to help with your independence. And this here's how. So before you even get some buy-in, you need to know what's important to that person. And that is how you're going to initially approach it. This conversation, the sooner the better. You've heard me mention end of life many times, but this does not have, you don't have to wait to the crisis. The encouragement all week has been to be proactive and plan because the nature of a crisis is that we don't know what's going to happen, and that's at any age. So the sooner the better, having this conversation at the right timing. It might not be a good time if you know this person is depressed that day. It might not be a good conversation, but it may be something where you get creative. Maybe your family meets up so many times a year and you, oh, let's develop our ethical wheels together and make it fun. Use that list that I provided you and you're going to come up with more creative things, but the sooner the better because the later you wait, whether it's going to a funeral home or something like that, you're going to spend more money. The grief takes over. And so plan accordingly. Identify mutual goals. If you find a window in there and they say, oh, my independence is very important. This is why, and you agree with that, that might be a good window to say, I really agree with that. So what does that look like for you? For me, it may look like something else, but if you're talking to them, give them the floor unless they ask you, what does it look like for you? And however way you two communicate or you communicate with your family. You also want to focus on your loved ones' wishes. So we need to go back to that leadership style slide. So if you know that you're more autocratic where it's just like, hey, this is what we're doing, you might want to take a breather or send someone else. Be honest with yourself. You want to focus on what they want because the tendency can be, well, wait, you wanted to be cremated? We've done funerals like all throughout the family. Like, wait, where is this coming from? And that can get a person to shut down because, as you can imagine, it can make them feel judged instead of being heard. Maybe they said the wrong word and if they meant to say the other word. So being able to focus on your loved one's wishes is important. Also using I statements. We just talked about feeling judged, and using I statements is a way to take that judgmental tone out of it. Another tidbit that I'm going to give you in my work as being a psychotherapist previously is saying, instead of saying why, if they say something that you don't really understand, say what makes you think that way. When you say why, it automatically puts this covering of judgment over it and people may shut down. So I statements and staying away from the word why and say, oh, what made you choose that? Instead of why did you choose that? Those are important. Then take breaks. It's some of you may be like me, you can get a little overzealous sometimes. We're gonna get the ethical will done today. Tomorrow we have an appointment with the attorney. Friday we're going here. And if that's okay, fine. But that's going to make some people shut down. So you want to take breaks. It may be that you're able to slide in a little pit of the ethical will and they don't know it. Like, tell me what's important to you. What's been important to you over your life? And maybe you're jotting it down, that type of thing. So take breaks. You don't have to get it all done at once, but you want to get it done. So these are the tips for starting the conversation. And if all else fails, you need to get help. In general, I recommend that you start building your team up. Who's your team to help you in your personal life? Because a lot of times we're having these conversations with our loved ones and we haven't done any of it. And so we don't know the emotional pull that just this conversation is having until we're in that seat. So being prepared to say, look, I've done this. It is emotional. So you can go in with a little bit more empathy. And before I get into this slide, I'll give you an example. I know there was one year we were working in a nursing home and we had to do the 5 wishes. They wanted us to complete the 5 wishes with residents who wanted it. And I remember sitting with someone and they just became so emotional because it's saying, do you want a warm towel on your head? Is there anybody you want to say sorry to or and the person became emotional, but I felt myself emotional as well because I'm reflecting on this is a heavy conversation and these people are in a nursing home. So the setting's different. They may be having that, this person maybe had that on the forefront of their mind. And also being very sensitive that some people just want to straight, don't ask me about the ethical will is not for me. Don't ask me anything fluffy. Let's just get straight to the point. DNR, DNI, all of that. So really knowing the person. So you want to know that you may not be the best person. So all of these things that we've talked about, you may be the wrong person. Or you may need to build your team because you're the right person, but you're not the end all be all. Remember the cookie we talked about earlier in the presentation. So you want to get trusted allies. Initially, I had friends here and I said, that's not the right term. Friends is not the right term. They may not be your friend. They may be a trusted ally that can provide with emotional support. They can communicate your wishes when family dynamics are complex. They may also be a friend. You want to lean into community groups, such as support groups, psychotherapists, um, those type of things that can help you. So some are peer-led support groups. So informal, they're not really paid. It may be some peer-led support groups. There may be some resources that you're reading. Maybe you have that favorite blog. Maybe you're in a Facebook community. There's just so many things nowadays where people can reach out to and get some support that you need to the level that you need it. And then spiritual advisors. Maybe for you, that's a pastor, a priest, a rabbi, or some other type of religious leader. So you just want to be sensitive. And like we said earlier, for some, it's none of these people. So being aware and not bringing in people that don't need to be there. So the informal supports may be for you, or it may be identifying for your loved one. Who are these people? Let's get them together so we can make this happen. Professional support. So a few support, this is just a few. Of course, care management. Of course, as an aging life care professional, I had to put care manager there. Care managers are all over. Generally, when you hear the term care manager, they're privately paid. And they help be your advocate. They coordinate healthcare and resources. They can go in and have that difficult conversation, and in some instances, they're saying what you said. I know that sometimes I'll hear, I literally told mom the same thing you just said. But the fact is, sometimes having someone outside is they don't have all that historical history. Remember, we talked about the recitals and the family drama. They don't have that. They come in as a new, fresh face, and sometimes people are trying to put their best face forward when there's a visitor. So instead of getting upset, if you're getting upset, call that friend or somebody because it can be frustrating, but also just being able to leverage it because your end goal is to get this thing done. And if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. And I'll just tell you, even though I'm a care manager, I would need my own care manager because when I go and see my family, they don't see Malika that's been working hard and doing this as a career. They see baby Malika. that I don't know that that will ever change. So sometimes you may be experiencing the same family dynamic where my family members who aren't in my immediate family can call me all day, but in my immediate family, I'm like, hey, can you call in my care man? Can you call my grandmother and talk to her about getting that paperwork together because she's just not hearing me. So that's a professional resource. Before we move on from care manager, when you hear that term, typically private pay, but you also will hear the term case manager. And generally that means there's some kind of funding from the government or someone that's paying for it. You can contact your Department of Aging to find out what resources are available through your county or where you live. So that's a frequent question that I get. Mediator. Sometimes the family conflict just may be so much that, hey, we can't even get to this point because of this thing that happened 20 years ago or last year or last week. And so you might consider just hiring a mediator to come resolve that issue and so you can get to the next step. And of course, an attorney. You want that guidance on financial and legal matters, ensuring that you have your proper documentation and someone's not just pretending and you find out later on that you've had the conversations and you've done all this work, but none of it's valid. That's a waste of time and energy. All right. So I am prepared for the worst, but hope for the best. I thought this was the best quote to wrap up this presentation because the planning is what you want to focus on. It's hard, it's emotional. You may shed a few tears trying to even approach your loved one with it, or you may say, look, I can't do this. Let me tap into my informal and formal supports. So I hope that this presentation has made you self-reflect and be honest that, oh, I'm the right person for this or I'm not, or being more keeping those open-ended questions and just having things flow as they should. And that's where we are. So I hope this was helpful. And thank you. I see you're back.
I am. Yeah, thank you. This
Yeah.
really approached the whole process from a completely different angle. And just one quick note on, oh, I see what you did with the WMAs there. That I was used to looking for my 3 digits and my 4 digits, but that's
Oh,
very cool. Yeah. Someone asked in the chat, what about a death doula? When might you bring a death doula in? Which I think is a really interesting concept.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Deaf doulas are very popular right now, and so you can have deaf doulas specialize in end of life. So I would recommend getting somebody who's culturally sensitive. They can walk your loved one through to the very last breath, bringing in all these things that are creative and beautiful. And that's something that you want to get documented and written. You can have a deaf doula. It's usually private pay. And it is one of those resources that you can use in addition to hospice. It's all about what your picture is, your scope is, and what you'll be able to add. So deaf doula is definitely on the list, and there is more and more, and care managers are using them. Care managers are becoming them. So I think that's a great comment and great ad. Absolutely.
Yeah. We do have a question. Someone wants to know, what's your advice for people with a parent who has dementia and refuses to have the discussion, or just someone who refuses to have the discussion in general, I would add, because I know that's common.
Yeah, that's very common. It depends on, I'm assuming that there's no planning that's been done. It also depends on where they are. Do they have capacity to make these type of decisions anymore? Is it, I don't want to talk to you about it because I don't understand it. Because dementia doesn't necessarily equate to not understanding. So I think the first thing would be determining whether or not they can really process what you're saying. So you may be, a lot of times dementia impacts our executive functioning. So that ability to plan and think things through. So that may be a factor, but it might be that you're just not the right person. You may get someone from the community that they love, that person that drops them off something, and they may be able to approach the conversation and get a little bit more information. So number one, do they really have the capacity? Can they do what you're asking them to do? And number two, if they do, is the relationship too close that you probably need somebody else to come in and intervene for you?
So there was a follow up there, and it was they have the capacity but refuse to do it. And I think you probably just touched on that right there. It can be really tricky. How about flipping it the other way? What if you have the plans and you want to share them, and maybe what you're sharing, you have like maybe you're trying, maybe you're aware of these tensions that might exist in the family, but you want to make sure that your wishes are known. You want to share them with the people who are affected by it. What suggestions might you have for the other way around?
Mm. Well, I think let's just flip it off. So you have to know know your audience. So
Hmm.
know your family. There may be some people who are very write it down. Like give me what it is. I want to read through it. I'll get back to you later. It may be someone who is more excited about watching the video that you've created for your ethical will and what you're thinking about the plan for that. And then you may have someone who's like, oh, can I help you with this? So I think that you really have to know your families or your systems what's going on there and where to meet them, because you're meeting them where they are. The important thing is that you're comfortable with what you've decided and you've taken the appropriate channels, but also that it may not be received well,
Hmm.
or there may be those myths popping up like, hey, don't come talk to me about that because I'm doing well. My health's good. I don't I don't want you coming over here messing up things. So I think just knowing your family member and just taking a risk. You may be wrong about someone and they want to sit down, and you may be the inspiration for them to start and get everything in order. So I hope that's helpful for you in answering that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Do we have any more questions? I don't see anything in the queue. Oh, there we go. Someone wants to know what's the difference between guardianship and conservatorship. I don't know if that falls within your expertise, but
I'm I'm not an attorney. I will say that, but for guardianship, a conservator is generally managing like the finances, and I'll have my attorneys chime in the chat if I'm off base. But generally, finances, and a guardian can be over person and finances. It depends on what the court decides, and so you can generally when I hear those terms as a care manager, as a social worker, and testifying in court, it's going to court and someone's being appointed to either manage finances or guardian or person or guardian of the everything.
great. Thank you for answering that. We have another one. How do you handle a family who refuses to honor the wishes of the deceased after the person has passed, such that they make the service religious or they dispose of personal property, just disregards the plans?
Mhm. Mhm. That's frustrating. It I don't know that there's too much. If they've created this, they're the person in charge. If my understanding is correctly, they're the person in charge and they ignore the plans. Correct?
Yeah, the person,
Yeah.
well, it doesn't say whether or not they're in charge. I don't know
Okay.
if that whoever typed that wants to clarify, but it's, maybe it's people around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if they're the person in charge, um, they would probably have more say so. So hope I don't know if someone showed up to a service and started reading scriptures or something and that person didn't want that, that would be maybe asking that person to leave. I would need a little bit more information, but I think this all kind of circles back to if they have these plans and they ignore them, you've selected the wrong person, unfortunately. So being able to really have those conversations, go over different scenarios so you can see where this person's thought process is, and you can only do so much. So if they have a change of heart and just ignore completely, you appointed this person. So
Right.
it
Or
just, go ahead.
yeah, I was just saying maybe it's someone you didn't appoint, but it's someone
Yeah,
who self-appoints, who tries to step in and take. So I think
yeah,
again, whoever your appointed person is has to be strong enough to say, "This isn't your place. I was
yeah.
selected. It's my duty." So
Yeah,
make.
you took the words out of my mouth. You have
Mm,
to have somebody who's, if you know someone's nice, but they're really a people pleaser, this may be a little tough because you're going to get opinions. And you're going to have to be able to stand alone when they're saying, no, the person did not want to be buried here. They wanted to be here, or they did, yes, they went to church every Sunday, but they didn't want the service. So you have
mhm.
to find somebody really strong and grounded in following what you want, and it gets a little bit more trickier if you didn't have anything in place and we're talking about you have a guardian appointed. They'll try to do their best they can, so it'd be magnificent. If you didn't get to the other things, at least maybe you have an ethical will that they found that can kind of guide them, like, oh, okay, this is what she believed or he believed or whatever. So that's my thoughts on that.
That's the ethical will concept, I think, is, boy, that's a big takeaway for me personally. I think that could really be a nice door opener.
Mhm.
Um, Another question, difference between a death doula and hospice care.
Mhm. So they overlap greatly. So hospice is often going to be covered by your insurance, and they'll come in, they can order equipment, they can bring in the medications that you need, should you need them towards end of life. They can call the doctor, they'll visit. They won't be there every day, but they'll visit. You get a team, like an interdisciplinary team that supports you and your loved one with the goal of making them comfortable. Deaf doulas are often private, like private pay, and they're coming in and they may do some kind of project or something that makes dying something that's dynamic and on another level according to you. And that's where I'm going back to this ethical will. It could be that you wanted items hanging from the ceiling, and you wanted aromatherapy, which hospice can also do and
Hmm.
incorporate, but the deaf doula will stay with you as much or as little as you want. They're like, I want to liken them to care managers, but their specialty is dying. They want to take that stigma out of dying. They want to make it beautiful. Like that's their job.
So they're almost the bookend to the birth doula, right? Which
Yes,
is like all
yes,
about your
yes,
wishes in delivery, like what you wish for. And again,
absolutely.
could be about what music you want playing,
Mhm,
where you want, all kinds of atmospheric things.
mhm.
Yeah, so it's a great concept. Another question, what's the best place to start, or where's the best place to start with a parent who's no longer able to care for themselves, poses a risk to their personal safety, and there are no community members or other family members able to step in?
Mhm. Um, for a family member who's no longer to care for,
Right.
yeah. So this would be more information needed because there are a few things that you could do, because are they a danger to themselves at this point? There's something that I use, it's called a capacity risk model,
Mm,
and I use it as a clinician, but it's a practical tool. So you're able to check off, okay, what is this person having difficulty with? And from looking at that, it may be evidence to show your family that may help them a little bit more. If you know this person is in danger and they need help, you want to call Adult Protective Services. You want to get them involved if you feel like it's reached that level. Um, because sometimes people are at different stages, like they're in denial that their loved one needs more help, or they're just kidding, or they're busy. So really assessing the danger, assessing where your loved one is, if you can get them to a neurologist, get them to a specialist, whatever the health situation is, if you could at minimum do that. Like if they're having cognitive trouble, get them to a neurologist for a complete medical workup. That way, sometimes it's not just Sally saying that mom is not doing well, but the neurologist has a report saying, hey, oh no, she's not doing well. She doesn't need to live alone. And sometimes, like I said, do you get those supports in, maybe a care manager or someone, they can mediate and talk to the family, and it's that outside voice that may have more weight, and they may be saying the exact same thing that you're saying, but the relationship isn't as close.
These are tough. This is why this is called sticky conversations.
Yeah.
Another question: is it best to start discussions in person with all the family there around the holidays, or on the phone between child and parent? What if the parents don't want to share anything?
Mm. This depends on your family and your beautiful bow that you may have on that I mentioned earlier that you may or may not have on it. But in general, for that example, without knowing your family, I would say maybe start with the one-on-one, just to because of just bringing that conversation up to a wide group, unless your family is really open, they may feel like you've dampened the holiday mood and spirit, and it could turn into something that you have very good intentions, but it's not received well. So maybe start off one-on-one. Remember, I told you you want to what's in it for them. So you want to get that buy-in and see where they are with the conversation. And like you said, they may say, I don't want to share this with your sister or your brother. So I think one-on-one would probably be in my general advice to start first.
Yeah, I can't imagine any kind of major holiday family gathering going well. I see the making of a movie that we all wouldn't want to star in. So let's see. What happens when Adult Protective Services gets involved with someone who refuses to acknowledge their incapacity, and if there are no other family members to step in?
Mhm. Adult Protective Services will investigate. And I will tell you, if they feel that the person has capacity, and when I'm using that word capacity, they have the right to self-determination, which I'm breaking down a little bit further. They have the right to make bad decisions. For example, what you identify as, oh, this is not, they're not doing well. They won't take their medications. Maybe they don't want to take them. And no one can come in and force anybody to come in and take their medications. So this whole thing hinges on whether or not they have capacity to make decisions or not. So they will do an investigation and they will let you know that, hey, we're going to take this a little step further. We're concerned, or you know what, we went out and your dad's just clear that he doesn't want to take the medication, and we can't do that. The alternative is bringing in, like, calling a case manager, bringing in a third party and letting them know what your loved one likes. Like, how do you get in the door? Oh, my mom really likes flowers, so I'm going to hire you and bring some flowers out and tell her, because sometimes it's like, oh, this nice lady came and talked to me, or man came and talked to me about this. And it's like, I've been having this same exact conversation with you 5 years. So sometimes it's just finding out who your ally is. It may be somebody, the person that goes to her village, her community village, that comes out. They may have a case manager that they send out. So really trying to search your network and leverage it.
Great advice. And this is one, maybe I can answer this. It says, you mentioned attorneys provide guidance on financial and legal matters. What kind of attorney do you suggest to work with? Is there any family attorney, or do you need a more specialized attorney? Are there specific areas I need to ask them about their expertise? And whoever sent that question in, I would say, please watch the first session if you haven't already, because Sherry did a really good job of talking about the need to really work with someone who specializes in estate planning. So I don't know. Did I answer that well enough?
I second listening to Sherry. Sherry's great, and she just knows how to answer those questions in a practical way. So I second that.
Okay, great. Here's Lydia wants to know. She joined late.
Oh.
So let's see. How do you handle a parent who should not be driving but does? She gets where she needs to go and she gets back, but I don't want an incident to happen before she understands her limitations. Lydia, I think we've all been you. If we
Oh
have
my goodness.
loved
I think
ones.
I could talk. an hour on this this topic alone. It's a big topic.
Hmm.
Driving represents so much of people's independence. What you could consider is a driving assessment. I have some clients who are very like, hey, if they can show me I can't drive, I'm going to take this driving assessment. You can pay privately for those, and they give a report of what's going on, and they may be able to drive, they may not be able to do. I've had I've ran support crews, and I've had some caregivers get really creative because their loved one was really far advanced in their cognitive decline, and they would not stop driving. But they could barely make it out the driveway, and they didn't want to get anybody harmed. So I think the most creative thing I heard in the last couple of years is this caregiver took the car to the mechanic, and the mechanic's been working on the mechanic's been working on this car for years now. But the person's cognitive decline is far enough where when they ask about it, it's like, it's still at the mechanic. Okay. And then there's some ethical, like, is it okay to lie to my parent? But at the core of it, what's at the core of it? They don't want the children in their neighborhood to get hit by their mom or dad driving out. So a practical advice would be get a driver assessment because that might work. And if they're too far down the line, you may have to get creative in taking the keys. So that's time for that, but I hope that's helpful for you.
No, that's great. I think you can actually go to the DMV, and I can't imagine that this would be a pleasant discussion to have, but I'm pretty sure they'll have senior, like you can refer somebody like for a driving evaluation at the DMV, and the folks who do the testing, like they'll like right away they'll stop it if they're not capable. So
You can. I think the challenge
yeah.
is if you have somebody with cognitive decline, as long as they have those keys, they're
Hmm.
not caring. They don't probably remember that the driver's license, none of that matters. I have
Right.
keys and I'm driving, so I
But
don't
yeah,
care.
but I mean, yeah, if you can get them there, I think like,
Oh,
if the
absolutely.
DMV decides they're not capable of driving, they will just yank their license. But yeah, can't be pleasant. Okay, someone made the comment that that strategy of taking the car to the mechanic is brilliant. Your car has a lot of issues. Here's another one. Does an aging parent have to allow adult protective services into the house to talk with them?
Um, they don't have to do anything. But I think it will suspect adult protective services has more authority than just the average social worker, or so they would attempt more than once to try to get in with your loved one. And if you can explain a little bit, like if they close the case, I would call back and report it again and let them know, hey, no, this is serious. Because sometimes APS is overwhelmed. They have people calling for things that aren't related to APS. So I sometimes you do need to call back again, and if not, I would try to reach out to the Department of Aging or get a care manager, something like that, where you can find somebody who can have an inroad to possibly help you and get a little bit more information so people can move forward the
Great.
right
And we
way.
have a little follow up on the driving. There is a Maryland driver risk screening. Someone, E. Rivera, very nicely put the link in the chat, and someone else in the Q&A, Charlene, says, I've known people who've had the person's doctor deem they're no longer qualified to drive and took it to the MBA. And the MBA can require you submit to an exam to renew your license if you're of a certain age. I didn't know that piece. So, yes,
Mhm.
there are ways to get those keys out of the hands. But
So,
if you
so
need to bring, yeah,
I just want to add that it's two things that we're talking about here, and it depends on it. So you're talking about the paperwork side of it, which is great, and you're talking about the actual keys.
hmm,
And I think that is where I've seen, because the people I've worked with, they could care less about what a piece of paper says. Some do, some don't. So know where you are with your loved one, because some people, as long as they have those keys, I can drive.
got it.
Like,
Yeah, yeah. Little piece of plastic isn't going to stop me. So, Yeah. But speaking of stopping, we are at 101. This has been really great. Malika, thank you so much. You've given me a lot to think about. I, my father-in-law came to mind many times, but no, it's terrific. And just one final note. Um, oh, okay. Jean from University of Maryland wants to thank the system for offering a social worker. So yes, that was an ad on. Remember, we will be sending links to every session. Please go back and watch them. It was really great to have you with us, Malika, to give a very different perspective, but I think a really important, needed one. So I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon, and please come back and join us tomorrow for our final session, which is going to be on LGBTQ estate planning, and we'll do it all again next year. So send us your ideas in the survey. Malika, thank you so much, and everybody be well, stay safe, and don't forget to vote. Take care.